Return the Warp Spinster here. Thank you for joining me today. We are going to be continuing to talk about this itty bitty leavings or tiny leavings or whatever I call it, all of the folded back corners from another project I'm working on, which is moving forward. I'm not going to be working with this one. We saw this one last time, but I don't like that blue. It doesn't go with the rest of this, and the blue and the orange, I don't know, has different association for me. Not necessarily a bad one, but not one that I want to see in the quilts, I guess. So here are the two pieces that I'll be working on. We're going to bring our own stripes, or make our own stripes, custom stripes for this, and that will help us to kind of figure out where else we might use those. So a couple of questions, comments, etc. from you all. Thank you for that. Thank you for your kind comments. One question is, will these ravel? Absolutely. They're already starting to ravel. You can see the more stitching you put over it, of course, the more controlled that will be. This one, I haven't done all the stitching over it yet. I want to do some pink, which is similar to this green, but I haven't found a pink. I don't usually work in hot pink, apparently, in my previous life. The one thing I did find was this silk lame braid from Rainbow Gallery, but I bought this for this needlepoint canvas I just designed and painted, and until I've finished that, I don't want to take any from the braid. So I will do that part of it later. Today we're just focusing on this. Someone else said that she would use fusible web under it. Absolutely. If I were doing a larger one, if this wasn't just plain, I would do that. Her comment, well taken, point well taken, that a little extra time makes it more stable, and that's absolutely true. Yes. So thank you for those comments and questions. And now let's move forward with stripes. So I have some black fabric, white fabric, a couple of different widths of stripes. We continue to have a house divided, not really, differing opinions on which stripe looks better where. Some prefer the uneven, narrower stripe, and some prefer the wider, even stripe. And that's what makes the quilting world interesting, is we all have different opinions and ideas and ways that we would do things. And then I also have some fabrics that appear in these, although that pink doesn't. So I pulled this pink and a little bit brighter green, although this is exactly the same green, oops, probably out of frame, exactly the same green here. This matches that. And the green in here is a little bit different than that green, but I don't think, for our purposes anyway, it's not going to make a big difference. And then I also have some strips that I had cut that are left over from the same project. And the orange one we just aren't going to be playing with today. So I have these three. This pink isn't really the same, but we'll see how it all works out. We're just experimenting, exploring. All right, stripes. Going to get to stripes. We are going to create our own stripes, and they can be as simple or wild and crazy as we want them to be. We had tried out last time, I believe. We tried some of the wide stripes, both straight and diagonal. And those are good. I like those, but I'm thinking we could mix them with some other custom stripes that use these other fabrics as well, and maybe some of the foo-for-all stuff too. I don't know what I did with this green braid. Maybe I know where I put it. Anyway, I am going off on, my brain is very much made for the World Wide Web. Everything is a hyperlink. I go off on these wild goose chases. I always learn something, but sometimes it's hard for me to circle back to where I started. Now, we can do stripes that are, let's just move this out for now, that will be long stripes that we use in this direction. Maybe completely different widths here. And say we were using that in between these. And use a stripe like that so it looks just kind of like a triple rail. I'm more inclined, I think, to do it so that the stripe is like this, which means we could still do a strip set like this, but then we subcut it and piece it together again. Now I'm thinking that probably the blue and green is where we're going to start, so that we're working with that. And how do I want to alternate that? Got blue, green, white. And I could sneak a black strip in there. Here goes my mess off camera. Sneak a black stripe in there somewhere. And just imagine this repeating, going out, that stripe like that. We could put in a stripe within a stripe, kind of a meta stripe. That's kind of fun, isn't it? I don't think I'd have these this wide when I'm doing it, or maybe I would, I don't know. And then maybe a black strip here so that you've really got quite a stripe going. Now for a piece this small, that may be a little much. If I were building it for something larger, then that might be appropriate, but we have a pretty small piece here. And maybe that's too much black and white, but remember, we can always do the couching and decorative stitching on this so that it pulls in more of this green and blue. So I think I'm going to start with a strip like that. I want to see what that looks like with the wider stripe. I confess that the wider stripe is generally my preference in these things, which you will see a lot in my current Alice in Wonderland series. And if we had that in between here, what if we did maybe a diagonal there instead, I think would work better. It's probably more of it than we want. We can make these, of course, varying widths as we put them together, so we have wider and narrower. Although again, because we have this small piece, we won't get much of a repeat if we have wide. And you can kind of not even see that stripe in there then. So maybe in this case, the narrower stripe is really what we want. My iron is agreeing with that, because then you can at least see a little bit of that in there. All right, let's go with something like this. This is a pretty simple stripe. I may need a little wider piece. Let me see what happened to my ruler. This is 3/4 of an inch. So if I do 1/4 inch seam on either side of that, it is going to be just a 1/4 inch, which is pretty narrow. And I might really lose that stripe entirely, or it might be a nice accent. I'm going to give it a go. We'll just see what happens. So I even think I'm kind of liking that order. Yes, I think I want something, because these are going to repeat. So once I sew this, then subcut it, then I'm going to sew them in that direction. So this black will end up next to this. You'll see what I mean. Sometimes it's hard to picture how strip, set, and stripe are going to work out. I'm going to sew these and we'll see what happens. I trimmed the white strip a little bit so that it wouldn't be so wide. And I also trimmed the blue and the green, which gave me these, which gave me an idea that we'll talk about later. So now at this point, I want to slice this into sections to create the strip that will go in here. Now, the width of the strip will be determined by how wide I slice these pieces. And I don't know that I want it terribly wide, because we still want the focus to be on this. Actually, we may be doing this, mightn't we? Yes. So wider or narrower? Narrower, it's kind of hard to see it. Too wide and it really changes the whole composition. So I'm thinking, what's that, about 1/2 inch? Oh, I'm good. All right. Seldom am I that good at visualizing lengths. So we're going to trim off this end. Left-handed is always kind of dicey. There we go. Too small for the bin. And I want it to finish at 1/2 inch, which means I need to do 1 inch. We'll start out with that many. I think will be enough. And they will line up like this to create our new stripe. And that will be plenty. We always, of course, have the option to do this, which creates a completely different stripe, but we could have achieved the same thing if we just made those two wider. So I'm going with the original plan here. So those end to end, and we will have our new stripe. Here is our finished, or at least could be finished right now, stripe. Doesn't mean we can't do more things to it. If I were to, for example, put a braid like this down the center here, I would definitely put stabilizer under it, because this has got a lot of seams and would be pretty wobbly. So I'm going to see what it looks like with pink, because pink is the only thing I have here at the moment. Really have to find that green. And then we could do some kind of couching, just pull a little more in. Pink really doesn't do much for it at this point, does it? And there's our stripe. And now we're back to the discussion of how we're going to do this. Of course, what are we putting up here and what are we putting down there? How did we do this? We had this bottom and top. Yes, I think we had it something like this. And then we would put something here. And I forget, I cut this at an angle, so I really need to honor that here, I guess. Adds a little more something, something. Probably when making these stripes, it would be better to do those subsections wider rather than narrower because you could trim it down, but be harder. Ooh. We could say it was too narrow for our liking. We could add this on the side, which would also stabilize those sides, which wouldn't probably be a bad thing at this point. And then put this on. Over here, we could do another black. We could do some white. Let's cover those edges. So we get the true width of that. And we could make those quite narrow. Almost like a piping in there. Or we could do, I'm just really into this wide stripe, strings and all. And another piece that might be fine, or even a standalone stripe piece. But that may be a bit much. What happens if we put, somewhere we had pieces of those, I wonder what I did with them. I'm going to go find them because that will be important to us kind of deciding how that will look. I shall return. They were right behind me, and I also found this pink piece. Yay! I knew it was somewhere, couldn't find it. So here's some of that green. And we have, of course, this green. That would go there, for example, and then the blue up here. Got so many things sticking out, it's hard to visualize it, isn't it? This would be on top of that strip. All right, that has a lot going on, doesn't it? Which may or may not be the look we're going for. Sorry, I'm probably jiggling the table here. This becomes very much a piece of its own, not just something that ties these two together. So that's a consideration. I think I had to call this may or may not. You may or may not like that. I think putting white in there would disconnect them too much. This doesn't seem like quite enough, or it's too much without something for the eye to rest on. So if we had black over here, and then scissors for this one, and a black then over here as well. And I'm thinking probably pretty narrow black, just as a piping effect. There's more of a film strip effect, doesn't it? Heaven help me if any of you are too young to remember film strips. All right, that's interesting. I have to think about how I feel about it. That makes this stripe then like little frames in film strip because that black is framing the rest of the pieces, which I think is not horrible. I'm sure you're calling out your opinions to me, and I appreciate that. I wish my hearing were better. I actually have really good hearing. Drives people crazy. Drives me crazy sometimes because I can hear things other people can't. My parents used to despair of ever keeping a secret when we were in the same house, even in a different floor. I could hear what they were saying. I think I'm liking that best so far, and here's our stripe. And most of you know well enough by now to know what I want to do next. I know, you probably all want to scream at me. You probably are all screaming at me. I'm looking for a little strip of green. Not that little. Oh, come on, Karen. All right. Now, if we... Seriously, you all are going to just despair of me, I'm sure. I'm not sure I'm actually going to do it, so don't have a heart attack yet. And remember, I always have more fabric, so if we were to split that, I think I would want it to be narrower than that. Sorry about my iron if that's a problem for you. Little Emily, she just likes to speak her mind. It's my favorite iron, and I don't know what I'd do without her. Might be okay if I actually split it and inserted it, but all right. It's safe, everyone. I'm not going to do that. But it would be an option. Another option, I haven't, even though for this particular piece, I want that to be quite narrow, I haven't trimmed those sides yet because, you know, you just never know what you want to do. I'm going to go see if I can find this green braid. I have an idea where it might be. Nope, no clue. But I say between needlepoint and crazy quilting, I have all kinds of threads and fibers floating around. So I could even do some couching like this around or up and down. I could even run it across the stripe. Not sure how I feel about that, but that would be an option to add some things to it. And would be less useful, I think, with the very narrow use of it, when I'd want those black pieces to be very narrow and accenty. I could also add in the other blue and tie it all together. Make sure I'm not going to drive myself crazy next time I use this for needlepoint. And it could do sort of another piece across there. And then the stripe becomes its own piece. Wouldn't it be fun to do a piece that's just stripes, use the same fabrics, but do all different kinds of stripes? That would be fun. Boy, so many ideas. Yikes, yikes. I could even pull this in across the whole piece. So this would be like the last thing I did. Some of you are probably thinking, that's the last thing you want to do, Karen. So as to tie the whole thing together, but I don't think I'm inclined to do that. This is actually a pretty good color with that, isn't it? All right. And so that is one option. The other thing that I'm looking at to today. I think next time I'll work on doing some curved stripes. That'll be fun. Now we could take my favorite stripe and these little things that I cut off. This one's a little narrower. I would probably want a wider stripe, but I could do much the same thing that I did with the triangles and stitch this down. It would just have gentle curves, I guess. This is kind of getting into next week's curved pieces. This is not on the bias, but I could coax it around as I did it, and then pulling this back out. I could do some more on top, and it wouldn't have to be, you know, just a gentle curve. I could just swirl the living daylights out of it if it were to cooperate with me. Oh, I like that. That would be very fun. And if you didn't want this strip appliqued on, I think I'm finished with the iron. We'll give Emily a rest here. Then we could piece it in there and make it as narrow or wide as we want. And do all kinds of fun stuff with it. So doing a composition of just stripes, we could do that. It may be a little much for this particular piece. That's a lot going on there, isn't it? Though, I don't know, I'm not hating it. It's taking on a different life when there's this much in just the strip that's separating them. And this almost takes on an equal role, or this takes on a role more equal to that. If we just had it split like that without shifting, that's a possibility. I think I still like it shifted. But with all of that going on, maybe I want it just to have white at top and bottom there. Let's put this up here to where we've got more of this going on. And then I thought I had some white squares floating around here. Easier to play with. Or not, so we'll just do this. And got a little bit of green accent thread in there. So white to fill in up there. And then white also to fill in down there. Whole different look. This diagonal is mimicking the angles of the triangles, which gives this almost a, sorry, off camera, it gives it an almost curved look. As that meets a stripe and goes up, or a pointed look, I guess. What if we did this with a straight cut of that stripe? This isn't very wide, but well, maybe minus even that green. The green's probably about as wide as this, but do some fun loops on it. Yeah, I think it needs some green. or some blue or something. Green would probably be narrower than that, but you get the gist. Just options for what you might do. And of course you could make your own striped fabric if you wanted to do it with particular colors rather than trying to find a fabric that's already the stripe that you want. I think I like that better than the diagonal because this is so scattery. This gives it a little more, with just a bit of interest floating down the middle. There's always the option to have that melt into the other pieces on here, which in this case with the white over here might actually be okay. I rather like that. We could do stripes that do this kind of thing across it. I think I might do one of those just quickly. And I will do it just by couching these at the moment. I would probably piece them if I were actually going to do some. Maybe or maybe not. Maybe I do want to just couch some on there. And do different widths, different angles. And then, and then, should have had a thinner strip of this. Introduce that down the center. All right, I have to do that. See, this is what I was going to do before I went off on one of my tangents. So, now this looks like a colorful mummy. You can imagine what it's like watching clouds with me, huh? Let's try that, just for fun. And I'm going to applique it. I'm not really going to couch them. I'm going to applique them with white thread because that's what I have, and we'll see what happens. I'll just start kind of laying them down and we shall see. The stripe, I decided to do that cross stitch that I like, and I like it in this context too because we do have white. I don't know that I would want to use it just on its own like that. I talked about splitting it and putting a stripe down the middle, and I have two choices there, of course. I can actually cut that in half, or not necessarily in half, but cut it down the middle and insert a stripe, or I could insert the stripe on top. And whether or not I tear off the stabilizer depends on which of those I decide to do. And whether I want that stripe or this one. Or I could have this down the middle. No, I like that as well. I think I want this wide stripe just because I like that wide stripe. In which case I would want to take off most of the stabilizer at least so that the seams don't get too bulky. Of course, wash away stabilizer is an option here, but unless I go and wash this now, it wouldn't really help me with reducing the bulk now. And washing this now would, of course, or even soaking it would start a ravel fest, I fear. All right, we're going to go with that, and I'm going to cut it, and I think I will try to aim for the middle. It's 1 inch wide, so let's go with half. And this part of it is going to turn out to be, each of the sides are going to be quite narrow. So let me think about that. What I would probably do if I were going to do this again is make this wider, because my brain was not calculating that I had seam allowances to deal with in there. So this time, let's try cutting a narrow strip of this and inserting it over the top of that. And we're going to make it pretty narrow. And the question becomes, do I then want to use this same cross stitch? Do I want to do an invisible stitch? I don't think I want the same cross stitch. That would be too much. Oh, Axel and Chloe are out next door, keeping the neighborhood safe. That's kind of an interesting stripe. I think I want it to be invisible thread. And now I'm thinking I shouldn't have taken off that stabilizer. I'll put some more on. It will be all right. Just, we're still experimenting, right? Now, if I were to put that with that, that is more doable in my mind anyway. All right. I'm off to invisibly applique. Another option, which I imagine at least one of you is shouting out to me, is that I could slightly curve this. It's a very narrow strip and I could slightly curve it. That's an option, but I'm going to aim for at least reasonably straight with this one. Finished stripe. This is just for exploration purposes because, and I did slide this off to the side a bit, totally intentional, really, truly. And that, of course, if we were actually going to seam this, I would lose this side in the seam. So again, I would want this to be a wider piece to begin with. Gives me more options, but we'll pretend this is finished and slide that in between. Add some interest. What if we, oh, I'm getting back into designing. And if you have not seen designs with different stripes in this video, it means I decided to make that a separate video because I got off on a tangent and away from the stripes. And I'm starting to do it again. So it looks like we haven't done very much today because we've got just 2 stripes in the end, but we did talk about a few other possibilities. Didn't start on this at all, but of course you could do the same thing with different colors. And we also talked about putting some of this. That's probably a little much on that particular stripe. And talked about maybe putting it there, maybe not. We have more to talk about with stripes, so we will do that next week again. And I would like to do some playing with curved stripes, curves in stripes and curved stripes. We'll do some more playing, and we may do some more straight stripes since we only really did a couple this time. This is Sunday. It's actually Saturday. I'm filming this on Saturday. On Wednesday, we will do more Alice in Wonderland. We have that one piece to work on, the embellishments. And then I really do want to start thinking about putting that piece together, at least the Queen of Hearts part of it. I hope to see you then and back here on Sunday. In the meantime, be well, be happy, be quilting. Peace.